Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
All right, normally at this time we present you DTMZ. Preempted today. DTMZ, normally always brought to you by the Arnold Palmer Design Whistler Golf Club. Al Chris Manson up at Whistler, he's a hockey fan. He understands what's going on today. I know he always looks forward to DTMZ, but big Canuck news. Book your corporate or buddy group of 12 or more now, and you, the group organizer, play for free. Tell us about your group at whistlergolf.com/groups. We got Thomas Drance joining us now from The Athletic and Sportsnet 650. On a day we find out that Jim Rutherford has signed a 3-year contract extension to stick around as team president of the Vancouver Canucks. Thomas, busy day. We can't thank you enough for joining us. How are you?
Doing well, running about town, covering the presser, the extension that, we haven't been talking about, but that has actually done a 3-year deal. Jim Rutherford having, gone through something of an ordeal here, I'd say, right? Over the course of his 2 years, 2.5 years, 2.5 cycles anyway. 12 months ago, he gave 2 press conferences this month, right? There was the one when the club returned from the road trip in which Quinn Hughes had sort of criticized the treatment of Tanner Pearson, medically speaking, in the wake of his, wrist surgery. And then there was the one in which the club introduced Rick Tocchet. And for me anyway, gentlemen, I really put that day, the day they hired Rick Tocchet, as sort of the turning point for the Rutherford era to this juncture in Vancouver. Club has racked up 108-point win rate since hiring Tocchet. It's felt different. It's looked different. Some of the structure stuff that Rutherford was talking about before, when we didn't have the template, when we couldn't see what we've seen now, it was just words. And now it's kind of just action. Now it's just kind of an expectation. Now it's just how this team plays. I really chart what we've seen over the course of the past year as starting with this club nailing the coaching hire. And really since then, you've seen Rutherford and his hockey operations department go on something of an unholy heater. It hasn't been perfect, but nothing in hockey management ever is. The fact is that they made a home run cut for Filip Hronek, and that's been, an unbelievable hockey fit for this team. They were disciplined, right? And very sharp in evaluating players on the open market in free agency, using that Oliver Ekman-Larsson buyout space just about perfectly. How good was Carson Soucy last night? How good a fit has him and Ian Cole been in sort of bolstering this club's defensive depth? And then you add Pius Suter, then you add Teddy Bluger and what he's done with that third line. And then coming into this season, a bunch of floor-raising trades. Lafferty, DeSmith, Zadorov. You've seen this club just slowly peck away at the edges of the roster to the point where now, this team, surprisingly to me, surprisingly too to Jim Rutherford, lost one of my headphones, that's okay. As Rutherford said himself, right? We're ahead of schedule. I am a little bit surprised, with no disrespect to the coaches and players who've got us here. Now you're seeing this team play like a real contender. And that's an incredible 12-month turnaround, especially when you consider what, most of us, most fans, most rival hockey executives thought about some of those moves. Like, Jim's been right. Jim's earned this deal. He's earned it the hard way, too. And, all you can do is say congratulations to him and note that the club was wise to get it done now.
Thomas, let's shift over. Rutherford just talked about Kuzmenko and said he's going to score someday, either for the Canucks or some other team. Boy, watching him sit on that bench for the entire third period last night, wow. And he's in trouble. No points, 9 games, confidence, defensive mistakes, the turnover. How are they going to fix this?
Oh, man. It doesn't feel like the right fit, right? It just doesn't feel like the right fit for system, coach, player. It just feels like it's not working out. And I agree with Rutherford, by the way. I don't think we don't have a huge sort of baseline or sample of Kuzmenko's NHL career. Frankly, we don't have a huge sample of him being an elite player in the KHL either. Rick, right? Like, this is a late bloomer, but since the age of 25, he's been a super productive offensive player, right? This is a guy who, we've seen it. Like, we've seen him protect the puck down low and find a teammate with a, feathered pass to a quiet area of the ice. We've seen him score in bunches at the net front. We've seen him deflect shots. We've seen him make incredibly skilled plays. We've seen him break games, and we've seen him break games against really good teams. You think about the Florida Panthers game earlier this year in Sunrise. I think this is a guy who can complement elite players. I think this is a guy who can amplify in meaningful ways the finishing ability of top players. It's just that the way that this team plays now, you can think about it in your mind's eye. Like, if you're not fast, if you're not really, really fast, and most of the wingers on this team at this point are really, really fast, right? You think about Mikheyev, you think about Lafferty, you think about Höglander, you think about Garland, right? Like, most of the wingers on this team have speed, and those that don't, right, those that aren't high-end skaters, although I think Brock Besser added a step this past summer, they're winning battles in bunches on the wall, right? I mean, Brock Besser, I know we're talking about the goal totals, but guy's been a monster at winning 50-50 pucks at the wall and also at the offensive blue line. Like, his forechecking game has fed his goal totals, right? You're not seeing that with Kuzmenko. You're not seeing the battles won, and you're not seeing the speed. And, I just kind of wonder, like, I don't know if it's a fit just in terms of the north-south style of game that this team wants to play and wants their wingers to play with the way that Kuzmenko recognizes the game and produces and looks to generate offense and puck touches. It feels like a round peg in a square hole. And, how does it get fixed? I don't know. But I do know this, if he's going to make one mistake and sit the entire third period, and he's going to take up $5.5 million on your books, and this is a chance to go into the playoffs with a contending team, like, can you afford to have $5.5 million that we know for sure will not play late in a close game in the playoffs? That to me is the quandary. And, how does this get fixed? I don't know, but it feels like the club's probably going to need to find a way to reallocate that cap space the way they did with Beauvillier. Except it's not going to be easy because Kuzmenko has an extra year of term on that deal.
Thomas, I liked their pushback last night. I love the fact that, how many times have people said the Canucks are too easy to play against? And you can't say that. Year. Not this year. And nope. Going into the playoffs, that bodes well because it gets a whole lot tougher in the postseason. But it was nice to see that pushback last night.
Yeah, and we've seen it in a handful of recent games. Like that Penguins game had some nastiness to it. That Buffalo Sabres game definitely had some nastiness to it. And the Canucks have been up to the task. I thought Rutherford's answer today was tremendous on how the nature of games change as you become this team, right? So, he noted, like, we're not going to see a lot of backup goalies. We're going to see teams best. And you're not just going to see teams best in terms of the way they're dialed in, the way they're playing at 90, 95% every time they hit Rogers Arena ice down the stretch. In contrast with some of the 70% efforts we'd see here down the stretch in previous years. You're not just going to see that. You're going to see teams target the Canucks physically, right? What's going to be, sort of line item one for teams' pro scouting, preparation on the whiteboard ahead of a game against the Canucks. It's going to be like, hey, challenge that lotto line, right? Challenge Vancouver's best players. Some of Vancouver's best players aren't big. Let's see if we can get them off their game. That's going to be part of it. And you're seeing that regularly now, right? The Penguins played that way. The Buffalo Sabres played that way, especially after the Miller on Dahlin hit. And definitely the Arizona Coyotes came in and tried to muddy up the game. That was clearly part of the game plan, or they wouldn't have done it with such discipline. To have guys like Zadorov be able to answer back and to have this team in general rise to the occasion, and then to get, one of those heavy goals. Yeah, it's a skill play, a drag shot by or he dragged the puck before letting off a wrist shot from Dakota Joshua on the game winner. But like, it is the heavy guy that scores the winning goal, right? I mean, that's part of where what this team's going to need going into the heavier part of the year. And, I think they're getting a crash course in it this week. And I don't think you can look at it and say that this team's been easy to play against or hasn't been up to the task. They've aced those tests.
Hey, Thomas, much like John Shannon, who joined us earlier, we know you had to move things around to join us today. And as always, we can't thank you enough. Appreciate it.
Anything for you, gentlemen. Come on.
Talk to you later. Next week. Thanks, Thomas.
Have a nice day.
See you, boys.
Appreciate it.